I folded the crumpled $20 bill into my pocket and felt nothing. Not guilt, not shame, just the smooth texture of worn paper and the faint metallic smell of old coins mixed with sweat. Mr. Harris was waiting outside in his black Mercedes, engine purring like a satisfied cat. I told myself this was temporary, that I deserved better than the peeling wallpaper and expired food stamps that defined my life with Mom. But when I saw Nora watching from across the parking lot, her eyes asking questions I couldn't answer, something cold settled in my chest. I turned away. Some bridges, I thought, were worth burning for the right price. My name is Amber, and I was 17 when I decided my mother's love wasn't enough. Grace, that's what everyone called her. And God, did she live up to that name. Worked double shifts at the diner on 5th Street, came home smelling like grease and coffee, and still managed to ask about my day with genuine interest. But genuine interest doesn't buy new clothes. It doesn't get you into the parties where everyone seems to glow with the confidence that money provides. I'd spent years watching classmates pull out credit cards their parents gave them, laughing about spring break trips to places I couldn't pronounce. Meanwhile, I was calculating whether we could afford both electricity and groceries that week. I wasn't angry at Mom. I was angry at the universe for making kindness and hard work worth so little. Mr. Harris found me outside the library one afternoon in late September. He was older, maybe 40, with silver-threaded hair and a smile that promised easy solutions. "You look like someone with dreams," he'd said, and I'd been stupid enough to think that was romantic instead of predatory. The autumn air had been crisp that day, carrying the smell of dying leaves and possibility. I remember thinking that this was the moment my life would finally change. I was right, just not in the way I imagined. The first month felt like a movie. Mr. Harris took me to restaurants where the menus had no prices, bought me dresses that felt like water against my skin, whispered that I was special, different from other girls. He had this way of making me feel seen, like I was the only person in any room we entered together. Looking back, I realized that was calculated. Predators always know how to identify the hungry ones. The girls with holes in their hearts shaped exactly like validation and escape. I started missing dinner with Mom, making excuses about study groups and friend hangouts that didn't exist. Grace never questioned me directly, but I'd catch her looking at the new earrings, the designer bag I'd tried to hide in my closet. Her silence felt like an accusation I wasn't ready to face. She'd touched the fabric of a new shirt I was wearing. Her fingers gentle, her expression unreadable. "Pretty," she'd say softly. "Must have been expensive." And I'd lie, smooth as silk, about a sale or a generous friend, watching something dim in her eyes with each invented story. Nora tried to talk to me once, cornering me by my locker between 3rd and 4th period. The hallway smelled like industrial cleaner and teenage body spray, and I remember wishing she'd just leave me alone, stop asking questions I didn't want to answer. "Amber, who is this guy? Why won't you introduce him to anyone?" Her voice carried concern, not judgment, but I heard judgment anyway. "You wouldn't understand," I snapped. "Some of us want more than this." I gestured vaguely at the fluorescent-lit hallway, the chipped paint, the whole suffocating smallness of our lives. She flinched like I'd slapped her. "More than friendship?" she asked quietly. The hurt in her voice was raw, genuine. I walked away without answering, my new heels clicking against the linoleum floor, shoes that cost more than Mom made in a week, shoes I hadn't paid for, shoes that felt less like freedom and more like shackles with every step. The truth was, I did want more than friendship. I wanted the escape hatch Mr. Harris represented, the promise that poverty was just a temporary condition I could seduce my way out of. I'd convinced myself I was being smart, practical even, playing the game the way I thought successful people played it. But money, I learned, always comes with strings, thick ones, the kind that wrap around your throat until you can't remember what breathing freely felt like. Mr. Harris started making demands, small at first, then increasingly invasive. He wanted to know where I was every hour, who I talked to, what I wore when he wasn't around. The gifts became transactions. "After everything I've done for you," he'd say, voice turning cold as February rain, "this is how you repay me?" His eyes would narrow, and I'd see something predatory surface, the thing he'd been hiding beneath charm and expensive dinners. I began to understand that I hadn't found a benefactor. I'd found an owner, and owners don't let their property walk away easily. The apartment he kept downtown became less like a luxury getaway and more like a trap. The door had a lock that only opened from the outside with a key. For security, he'd explained when I first noticed. I'd believed him then. I didn't anymore. Chloe Martinez noticed before anyone else. She was a year ahead of me, pretty in that effortless way that comes from never having worried about anything real. She cornered me in the bathroom one afternoon, reapplying lipstick that probably cost more than my mother's weekly paycheck. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. "I saw you getting into that car," she said, studying me in the mirror. "The black Mercedes. That's Brad Harris, isn't it? My dad plays golf with him." She smiled, and it wasn't friendly. Does his wife know he's picking up high school girls? My blood went cold. Wife. He'd never mentioned a wife. Though looking back, there were signs I'd ignored. The way he never invited me to his real home, how he always paid cash, his phone calls that he'd taken another room with the door closed. "I don't know what you're talking about," I managed, but my voice shook. Chloe laughed, sharp and bright. "Sure you don't. Look, I'm not judging, but information like this, it's valuable, you know? Maybe we could work something out." The bathroom suddenly felt too small, the air thick with the chemical sweetness of her perfume and my growing panic. Blackmail. She was actually trying to blackmail me. The word felt absurd, like something from a bad television drama. But here it was, my new reality. "What do you want?" I whispered. "Nothing much, just a little monthly contribution to my discretion fund. Let's say 500? I'm sure your sugar daddy can spare it." She examined her reflection, satisfied with what she saw. I wanted to scream, to tell her to go to hell, but the words stuck in my throat. Because she was right. If this got out, if his wife found out, if Mom found out, if the school found out, everything would collapse. The carefully constructed fantasy I'd built would crumble, and everyone would see me for what I really was, a desperate girl who'd sold herself cheap and called it survival. I nodded, hating myself, hating her, hating the whole ugly situation I'd walked into with my eyes wide open and my heart full of stupid, desperate hope. The payments started the next week. I had to ask Mr. Harris for more money, inventing expenses and needs. He gave it freely at first, pleased with my apparent growing dependence. But his mood was darkening. He'd started drinking more, showing up with alcohol on his breath and anger in his eyes. The sweet words dried up. The gifts came with lectures about gratitude, about knowing my place. One night in early October, he showed up at my school, just sat in his car across the street watching. I saw him there during lunch, and my stomach dropped. This was new, this surveillance. When I got to his apartment later that evening, he was waiting with questions. "Who was that boy you were talking to by the gym?" "Just someone from my chemistry class. We have a project. Don't lie to me." His voice was quiet, dangerous. I saw how he looked at you, how you smiled at him. It wasn't like that. We were just talking about school. He grabbed my phone, started scrolling through my messages. I stood there, frozen, watching him violate my privacy like it was his right. Maybe I'd given him that right when I accepted the first gift, the first dinner, the first lie. "You're mine," he said, still reading my texts. "You understand that, don't you? I've invested in you. Time, money, attention. That makes you mine." The word echoed in my head. Mine. Like I was a car he'd purchased, a house he owned. I nodded because disagreeing seemed dangerous, and I left that night with bruises on my wrist from where he'd held me too tight. Marks I'd have to hide with long sleeves, even though October was unseasonably warm. The night everything broke. The sky was the color of a bruise, deep purple fading to sickly yellow at the edges. I was supposed to meet Mr. Harris at his apartment downtown, a place he kept separate from his real family, his real life. The building was upscale, with a doorman who never quite looked at me, who'd learned to avert his eyes from the young girls who came and went from Mr. Harris's floor. I'd started feeling sick every time I walked through that marble lobby, the expensive furniture and city views feeling less like luxury and more like a gilded cage. He was drunk when I arrived, standing by the window with a glass in his hand. The sun was setting behind him, turning him into a dark silhouette against the blood-orange sky. "My wife's lawyer called today," he said without turning around. "Apparently someone sent her photos. Of us. Of you." The world tilted. "What? Don't play stupid, Amber. It doesn't suit you." He turned, and his face was a stranger's, twisted with rage and something uglier. Fear, maybe. Desperation. "You greedy little bitch! How much did you ask for? How much was it going to take to keep your mouth shut? I would never..." But he wasn't listening. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks that would darken to purple by morning. The glass dropped from his other hand, shattering against the hardwood floor. Neither of us looked at it. "You've cost me everything. My marriage, my reputation, probably my business. And for what? So some trailer trash teenager could play dress up?" The words hit harder than his hands. Trailer trash. That's what I was to him. That's what I'd always been. Not special, not different. Just another desperate girl stupid enough to believe in easy answers. Just another transaction that had turned out badly. Something to be disposed of now that it was causing problems. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. "You think you can ruin my life and just walk away? You think there won't be consequences?" His free hand moved to my throat, not squeezing, not yet, just resting there like a promise, like a warning. I could smell the whiskey on his breath, see the broken blood vessels in his eyes. This was it, I realized. This was how girls like me ended up as statistics, as cautionary tales, as bodies found in rivers with no one to mourn them because they'd burned all their bridges chasing fool's gold. I don't remember exactly how I got away. I know I screamed. I know neighbors must have heard because suddenly there were voices in the hallway, fists pounding on the door. Mr. Harris let go, and I ran. I ran past concerned strangers, downstairs instead of waiting for the elevator. 4 flights taken 2 at a time in heels that kept catching on the steps. I heard him shouting behind me, heard a door slam, heard the elevator ding as he probably tried to follow. But I was faster, driven by pure animal fear, and I burst out into the evening where rain had started to fall in cold, accusing drops. I had nowhere to go. Nora wouldn't want to see me after how I'd treated her. I'd burned that bridge thoroughly, convinced I was trading up to something better. The other girls at school who I'd thought were friends had turned out to be acquaintances at best, vultures at worst, interested in proximity to my apparent success, ready to devour the story of my failure. The realization hit me standing there on the sidewalk, rain soaking through my expensive dress, the one he'd bought me, the one that had seemed so beautiful and now just felt like evidence of my own stupidity. I'd traded everything real for something fake, love for money, friendship for gifts, dignity for designer labels. And now I had nothing. Nothing except the bone-deep cold of October rain and the taste of fear still sharp in my mouth. My phone was dead. I'd forgotten to charge it, too caught up in my glamorous, hollow life to remember basic things. So, I walked. 20 blocks in heels that blistered my feet, through neighborhoods that shifted from polished to rough, past closed shops and suspicious stares. A homeless man asked if I was okay. A group of teenagers whistled and called out things I tried not to hear. A woman smoking outside a bar offered me her jacket when she saw me shivering, and I almost cried at the simple kindness of it, the way she didn't ask questions or demand anything in return. I declined. I didn't deserve kindness just then, but the gesture stayed with me. When I finally reached our apartment building, the sight of it made me want to cry. The flickering streetlight that had been broken since June and the landlord kept promising to fix. The cracked steps that Mom had put bright yellow tape on so no one would trip. The whole tired shabbiness of it that I'd spent years resenting, hating, trying to escape. This was home. This was real. And I'd been so busy chasing illusions that I'd forgotten what real was supposed to feel like. Mom's car was in its usual spot, her shift at the diner finished hours ago. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling like a confession. My feet were bleeding now, the expensive heels having rubbed them raw. I left small red footprints on the concrete, evidence of my journey from fantasy to reality. The door was unlocked. It always was when she knew I'd be coming home late, despite my lectures about safety, despite the neighborhood not being the best. "What if something happens to you while you're waiting for me?" I'd asked once. She'd smiled, sad and knowing. "Then something happens, but you'll have a safe place to come home to. That's what matters." The apartment smelled like her lavender hand soap and the chamomile tea she drank before bed, comforting and familiar in a way that made my chest ache. Grace was sitting at our small kitchen table, a mug between her hands, still wearing her diner uniform with the name tag slightly crooked. She looked up when I walked in, took in my soaked dress, my smudged makeup, the bruises already forming on my arm in the unmistakable shape of fingers. She didn't ask questions. She didn't say, "I told you so," or "What were you thinking?" or any of the things she had every right to say. She just stood, walked over, and wrapped her arms around me. That's when I broke. Sobbing against her shoulder, I told her everything. The older man, the money, the lies, the blackmail, the violence. Every ugly truth I'd been hiding came pouring out between gasps and tears. The shame of it, the fear, the bone-deep exhaustion of trying to be someone I wasn't. How I'd thought I was being smart, playing a game I could win, only to realize too late that the game was rigged and I'd never had a chance. She held me through all of it, one hand stroking my wet hair, making soft, shushing sounds like I was 5 years old again and scared of thunder. Her uniform smelled like coffee and French fries, familiar and safe. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge, just held space for my confession, like it was the most important thing in the world. When I finally ran out of words, she pulled back just enough to look at my face. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't crying. Not yet. "Oh, baby," she whispered. I knew something was wrong. I've been so scared. "You knew?" "Of course I knew. You're my daughter. I know when you're happy and when you're hiding. I know what love looks like and what fear pretending to be love looks like. I didn't know how to reach you. Every time I tried to talk, you'd shut down, close off. I was terrified I'd push too hard and lose you completely." She guided me to the couch, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. The same faded quilt her mother had made, the one I'd always thought was embarrassingly old-fashioned. Now it felt like the safest thing in the world. She made me tea I didn't drink, just held the warm mug in my hands, letting the heat seep into my frozen fingers. Then she sat beside me, holding my hand like I might disappear if she let go. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." I looked at her through swollen eyes, confusion cutting through the exhaustion. When I was 19, I met a man, older, successful, charming. He promised me the world. Her voice was steady, but pain flickered across her face like distant lightning. He promised he'd take care of me, that I'd never have to worry about money again. Your grandmother tried to warn me, but I didn't listen. I thought she was just old-fashioned, jealous of my happiness. I thought I knew better. The rain had stopped outside, but I could still hear water dripping from the gutters, a steady rhythm punctuating her words. For a while, it was wonderful. He took me places, bought me things, made me feel special in a way I'd never felt before. My family was working class, not poor, but not comfortable either. And here was this man offering me an escape from all the struggle I'd watched my parents endure. "What happened?" I asked, though part of me already knew. There was only one way these stories ended. For a while, nothing. Then everything. He became controlling, possessive, started isolating me from friends and family, got angry when I wanted to spend time with anyone but him. The gifts became weapons, things he could hold over my head, proof that I owed him. When I got pregnant, with you, he wanted me to get rid of it, said a baby would ruin everything, ruin our life together. When I refused, he left, disappeared like he'd never existed, blocked my number, moved without leaving a forwarding address. I heard through mutual friends that he'd gotten married to someone else within 6 months, someone from his own social class, someone who fit properly into his real life. She squeezed my hand tighter. I was broke, alone, pregnant, and stupid. My mom took me in, but she died when you were 2. Cancer that came fast and mean. After that, it was just us. Every single day since then, I've worked to make sure you had food, shelter, a chance at a better life. Not because I had to, because loving you is the only thing I've ever done that felt truly important. You were the good thing that came from all that pain, my second chance to do things right. Tears were sliding down my cheeks again, but different ones now. Not shame, but recognition. You never told me. I didn't want you to think that's what you came from. I wanted you to see yourself as a gift, not a consequence. But maybe I should have told you. Maybe then you would have known that those men who promise easy answers, they're lying. They always are. They see young girls as toys, as status symbols, as things to use and discard. And the worst part is they make us feel grateful for it. They make us think we're the lucky ones. I thought about Mr. Harris, his empty promises and cruel words. Trailer trash. Greedy little bitch. How quickly affection turns to hatred when you stop being useful. I'm sorry, Mom. My voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I was so stupid. No. Her voice was firm. You weren't stupid. You were desperate and young and scared of being poor forever. I understand that fear better than anyone. I live with it every single day. Every broken appliance. Every unexpected expense. Every time the car makes a weird noise. I'm terrified. Terrified we'll end up homeless. That I won't be able to provide for you. That all my work will amount to nothing. She touched my face gently, brushing away tears. But Amber, listen to me. We might not have money. This apartment is shabby, our furniture is secondhand. I shop at thrift stores and clip coupons. But we have something so much more valuable. We have each other. We have dignity. We have the ability to look at ourselves in the mirror without flinching. Those things, you can't buy them. And once you've sold them, they're almost impossible to get back. Almost. That word hung in the air between us. Almost. A lifeline thrown across dark water. You think I can fix this? I asked. I think you can try. It won't be easy. That girl who's blackmailing you, the man who hurt you, there will be consequences to face. Legal ones, social ones. People will talk. They'll judge. Some will blame you, call you names, say you brought it on yourself. It's going to hurt. She paused, making sure I was really hearing her. But you don't have to face them alone. I'll be there. Every step, every hard conversation, every moment you want to give up. I'll be right there. Why? The question slipped out. After everything I said, everything I did, how I treated you, why would you still help me? Because that's what mothers do. Because I remember being 19 and making terrible choices. Because love isn't conditional. It doesn't come with a contract or an expiration date. It just is. She smiled, tired and genuine. You're my daughter, my only child, the best thing that ever happened to me. There's nothing you could do that would make me stop loving you. Nothing. The next morning, I went to school early. My body ached from the night before. Bruises blooming purple and yellow on my arms. Feet still raw from the long walk home. I'd covered what I could with makeup and long sleeves, but anyone looking closely would see, would know. I found Chloe by her locker, looking fresh and untouchable in her designer clothes, surrounded by her usual group of friends who laughed at her jokes and competed for her attention. We need to talk, I said, my voice carrying across the hallway. Her friends went quiet, sensing drama. Chloe turned, eyebrows raised, that familiar smirk playing at her lips. Let me guess. You don't have this month's payment? No. My voice was steadier than I expected, steadier than I felt. I'm done paying you, and I'm going to the principal. Her smirk faltered. The hallway had gone silent, people pretending not to listen while obviously listening. You wouldn't dare. I'll tell everyone. Tell them. Tell everyone. I'll tell them too. Every detail of what happened, including your blackmail. We'll see whose story people believe. I could see the calculation in her eyes, weighing risks and rewards. Chloe Martinez had grown up with money, had never faced real consequences for anything. Daddy's lawyer fixed her speeding tickets. Mommy's checkbook smoothed over her academic struggles. The idea that she might genuinely be in trouble scared her. You're blowing this way out of proportion, she said, but the confidence was gone from her voice. Her friends had taken a subtle step back, already distancing themselves. Maybe, or maybe you messed with the wrong broke girl. I walked away before she could respond, my heart hammering but my head clear. Behind me, I heard whispers erupting, phones coming out. By lunch, everyone would know something had happened. The rumors would be savage, creative, probably at least partially accurate. But I'd told the truth first, and that had to count for something. Principal Morrison listened to my story without interruption. Her office smelled like coffee and old books, and through the window behind her I could see the football field where normal kids lived normal lives, worried about normal things. Her expression shifted from skepticism to concern to quiet anger as I detailed everything. Mr. Harris, the relationship, Chloe's blackmail, the violence. I showed her the bruises, gave her his name, address, the license plate of his car. You understand we'll need to contact the police, she said when I finished. This isn't just a school matter. This is assault, potentially statutory rape depending on when the relationship began, and extortion. These are serious crimes. I nodded. I'd known this was coming. Mom and I had talked through it the night before, sitting at our kitchen table until dawn, weighing options and consequences. I know, and I'll cooperate fully. I need to make this right, as much as I can. You're very brave to come forward, Principal Morrison said. Most girls in your situation wouldn't. I'm not brave. I'm just tired of being scared. The investigation took weeks. Police interviews where I had to recount every humiliating detail to strangers with badges and notepads. Medical exams that made me feel like evidence instead of a person. Statements given and re-given until the words lost all meaning. Just sounds I made to satisfy the legal system's hunger for documentation. Mr. Harris was arrested. The news ran his photo. Distinguished looking in a suit, the kind of man people instinctively trusted. Pillar of the community, successful businessman, married father of 2. The comments on the news articles were brutal. Half called for his head, the other half called me a liar, a gold digger, a slut who'd asked for it. His wife filed for divorce. I never met her, but I thought about her sometimes. Wondered what she knew, what she'd suspected, how many girls like me there had been before. Chloe faced disciplinary action from the school. Her parents hired a lawyer. Expensive, the kind who wore $1,000 watches and spoke in measured tones about youthful indiscretion. But the evidence was clear. Texts demanding payment, threatening messages, timestamps that proved intent. The police added extortion charges to their investigation. In the end, Chloe was expelled, facing criminal charges that her father's money could reduce, but not eliminate. The legal system ground forward with terrible inevitability. Court dates and depositions, lawyers explaining things in language designed to confuse, plea bargains and negotiations happening in rooms I wasn't allowed in, about crimes committed against my body. Mr. Harris eventually pleaded guilty to lesser charges, avoided jail time through some legal maneuvering I didn't fully understand, but got probation, mandatory counseling, and a spot on the sex offender registry. It felt simultaneously like too much and not enough. Through it all, Mom was there. She rearranged her schedule to come to meetings, requested time off she couldn't afford to miss, held my hand through the difficult conversations, reminded me on the hardest days that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what's right, even when you're terrified. She bought me a journal and suggested I write things down, said it helped her after my father left. I filled 3 notebooks with rage and shame, and slowly, gradually, something that felt like healing. Nora approached me one afternoon in November. The leaves had turned brilliant orange and red, nature's way of making death look beautiful. She found me sitting alone in the cafeteria, at a table in the corner where people wouldn't stare. I heard what happened, she said, standing awkwardly with her lunch tray. Some of it, anyway. The parts people are talking about. I couldn't look at her. I'm sorry for how I treated you, what I said. You were just trying to be a good friend and I know. Her voice was soft. I was angry at first. Really angry. But then I thought about how scared you must have been. How alone. And I realized I should have tried harder to reach you. I should have been a better friend. You were a perfect friend. I was the problem. She smiled. Sad, but genuine. Nobody's perfect, Amber. We're all just trying to figure it out. The difference is whether we're willing to admit when we're wrong and try to do better. She held out her hand. Friends again? I took it, feeling something tight in my chest finally loosen. Friends. She sat down, opened her chocolate milk, and started telling me about the drama in her English class like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't spent months treating her like garbage. That was Nora, generous in ways I was still learning to be. The road back wasn't smooth. There were stairs and hallways, whispered conversations that stopped when I approached. The particular cruelty of teenage judgment. Someone spray-painted something obscene on my locker. Anonymous accounts on social media called me names. Said I'd ruined an innocent man's life for attention. A group of boys made crude jokes loud enough for me to hear about my experience and whether I gave discounts. But there were also unexpected kindnesses. Teachers who checked in on how I was doing, who extended deadlines without making me explain why I needed them. Classmates who'd had their own difficult experiences and quietly shared them. The girl who'd been assaulted at a party, the boy whose uncle had touched him wrong, the whole hidden network of trauma that teenagers carry in silence. The school counselor, Ms. Peterson, who met with me twice a week and taught me that shame and guilt aren't the same thing. One is about what you did, the other about who you are. You made mistakes, she told me during one session, her office warm and dim with late afternoon sun. Serious ones, with real consequences. But those mistakes don't define you unless you let them. What defines you is what you do next. How you grow from this. Whether you let it destroy you or build you into someone stronger. What I did next was focus on school. Really focus, for the first time in years. I'd been so busy resenting my circumstances that I'd forgotten education was the legitimate way out of poverty. Slower than I'd wanted. Harder than Mr. Harris's false promises. But real. Solid. Something no one could take away once I'd earned it. I joined the tutoring program. Started staying after school for extra help in math and science. Turned out I was good at biology when I actually paid attention. Fascinated by the way systems worked together. How things could break down and sometimes repair themselves. Mom bought me a used laptop from a pawn shop. Her entire week's tips spent so I could type essays and research scholarships. The keys stuck sometimes and the battery only held a charge for an hour, but it was mine. When I tried to refuse it, overwhelmed by the sacrifice, she shook her head. Let me do this. Let me help you the right way. Not with guilt or strings attached, just because I love you and want you to succeed. I applied to colleges that winter. State schools mostly, places with good financial aid programs and practical degrees. My guidance counselor, Mr. Chen, helped me write an essay about resilience and second chances that managed to be honest without being pitiful. We went through 17 drafts, him pushing me to dig deeper, to find the truth beneath the shame. Don't apologize for your story, he said during one of our sessions. Don't minimize it or try to make it palatable. Just tell the truth. Admissions officers can smell bullshit a mile away, but they respond to genuine growth. Show them you learned something, that you're not the same girl who made those choices. The essay started. I learned the price of things before I understood their value. In March, the acceptance letters started arriving. Not from everywhere. My grades had suffered during those months with Mr. Harris, and there were consequences to that. But enough. Enough to know that the future wasn't closed, just narrower than it might have been. I chose a state school 3 hours away with a good social work program. Close enough to visit Mom on weekends, far enough to feel like a fresh start. The scholarship covered most of tuition. I'd have to work part-time and take out small loans for the rest, but it was manageable. Real. Built on my own effort instead of someone else's money and expectations. The night before I left for college, Mom and I sat on the apartment building's roof. It was technically off-limits, but the lock had been broken for years, and the landlord was too cheap to fix it. We used to come up here when I was little, looking at stars and making wishes on airplanes we pretended were comets. I'm proud of you, she said, her voice carrying over the city sounds, distant traffic, someone's music, a dog barking. You know that, right? I know, and I did. She'd told me 100 times in 100 different ways over the past months, in packed lunches and extended curfews, in the way she never made me feel small for my mistakes, never weaponized my shame, but it still felt good to hear. I'm proud of me too, I added, which sounds arrogant, but it doesn't sound arrogant. It sounds healthy, she smiled. You survived something that could have destroyed you. You took responsibility for your choices instead of playing victim. You're rebuilding your life on your own terms, one decision at a time. That's not arrogance. That's strength. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky fade from blue to purple to black. Stars emerged one by one, tiny points of light in the darkness. The city spread out below us. Millions of lives being lived. Millions of stories we'd never know. I thought about the girl I'd been a year ago, so convinced that money was the answer, that shortcuts were smart instead of dangerous, so sure that her mother's simple life was something to escape rather than something to honor. Thank you, I said quietly, for not giving up on me, for being patient when I was awful, for showing me what real love looks like, the kind without conditions or contracts, for loving me enough to let me fail and help me get back up. Mom put her arm around my shoulders. Baby, that's not something you thank someone for. That's just what love looks like. The real kind. The kind that lasts. The kind that doesn't quit when things get hard or ugly or complicated. She paused, looking up at the stars. My mother, your grandmother, she told me something before she died. said that the measure of love isn't how you treat someone when they're easy to love. It's how you treat them when they break your heart, when they disappoint you, when they fail. That's when love either reveals itself as real or exposes itself as conditional. She sounds wise. She was. Stubborn and opinionated and terrible at taking advice herself, but wise. Mom laughed softly. She would have loved you, would have loved seeing the woman you're becoming. We stayed up there until the air grew cold, and the stars seemed close enough to touch, talking about everything and nothing. My fears about college, her plans to finally take that ceramics class she'd been putting off, whether we should get a cat for the apartment so she'd have company when I was gone. College was hard in ways I'd expected and ways I hadn't. The academics were challenging, but manageable. The social part, making friends, trusting people again, letting myself be vulnerable without wondering what they wanted from me, that was harder. I found myself drawn to other students who seemed a little bruised by life, who understood that not everyone comes to school with the same advantages. Sarah, my roommate, had grown up in foster care. Miguel was undocumented, brilliant, and terrified of being discovered. Keisha was a single mother juggling classes and a toddler. We formed a small, tight circle. Study groups that turned into late-night conversations about everything and nothing, the kind of friendships built on mutual respect instead of mutual benefit, on shared struggle instead of shared privilege. I called Mom every Sunday. She'd tell me about her week at the diner, which regular customers came in, the new hire who couldn't remember orders to save her life but was trying so hard, how she'd finally convinced the owner to fix the freezer that had been broken for months. I'd tell her about my classes, the paper I was writing on economic inequality and its impact on child development, the part-time job I'd found at the library that paid minimum wage but let me study during slow shifts. Small things, regular things, the building blocks of a real life. Sometimes she'd mention seeing Nora around town, how she'd stopped by the diner to say hello and brought college brochures for me. Sometimes she'd talk about the apartment feeling too quiet without me, then quickly add that she was fine, that I shouldn't worry. I worried anyway. That's what daughters do. In my sophomore year, I started volunteering at a local youth center, working with teenage girls who reminded me of myself at 17, angry, scared, desperate for someone to promise them easy answers. The center was in a rough neighborhood, funded by grants that were always about to run out, staffed by people who could have made more money anywhere else but chose to be there anyway. My supervisor, Ms. Washington, was a woman in her 50s who'd survived things she only hinted at, who looked at these girls with a combination of fierceness and tenderness that made my chest ache. I didn't preach at them. I didn't tell them what to do or deliver lectures about making good choices. I just listened, shared my own story when it seemed relevant, and tried to be the kind of presence I wished I'd had. The kind that says, I see you, I've been where you are, and there's a way through that doesn't require selling pieces of yourself you can't get back. One girl in particular, Maria, 15, with eyes too old for her face and bruises she tried to hide with makeup, came to me after a session. We'd been talking about healthy relationships versus controlling ones, red flags versus green flags. She'd been quiet the whole time, picking at her nails, not meeting anyone's eyes. That stuff you said about older men and promises? She started, then stopped, looked at the door like she was calculating escape routes. Yeah? I kept my voice gentle, non-threatening. I'd learned from Ms. Peterson that sometimes the most important thing you can do is just make space for someone's truth. There's this guy. He's been texting me, saying nice things, wants to meet up. He's like 25 or something. My mom would kill me if she knew. I felt something old and familiar twist in my stomach. Fear. Not for me, but for her. For the path she was walking down. The one I knew ended in pain. What does he promise you? I asked carefully. That he gets me. That I'm mature for my age, that he can take me places, buy me things, make me feel special. She looked up, and I saw my 17-year-old self staring back at me. Everyone else treats me like a kid. He treats me like I'm worth something. Every word was a painful echo. I remembered that feeling, the intoxication of being seen as special, as different, as mature beyond my years. Not understanding that predators use those exact words because they work, because they're designed to exploit the gap between how young girls feel and how young they actually are. And how does he make you feel right now? I asked. She thought about it, really considered the question. Nervous, Excited, kind of scared, but scared in a way that feels, I don't know, thrilling? I nodded. I understand that feeling. I really do. Can I tell you what I learned? She nodded, and I saw myself in her so clearly it hurt. The hope and fear warring in her expression. The desperate wish for someone to tell her it was okay, that she could have this thing she wanted without consequences. Men who want to be with teenage girls, who have to promise you things to get your attention. They're not looking for a relationship. They're looking for someone they can control. Someone who doesn't have enough experience to see through their lies. The nervousness you're feeling? That's your instincts trying to warn you. Listen to them. Tears welled in her eyes. But what if this is my only chance? What if nobody else ever makes me feel special? Oh, sweetheart. I reached out, let her decide if she wanted the comfort. She did, leaning into the hug like a plant toward sunlight, like she'd been starving for gentle touch that didn't want something in return. You are special. Right now, exactly as you are, with nothing and no one added. And the people who are supposed to be in your life will see that. You won't have to audition for them with fear and nervousness and the sick feeling that you're doing something wrong. You'll just know. It'll feel easy. Safe. Right. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. What should I do? Block his number. Tell a trusted adult. Your mom, a teacher, someone. Let yourself be 15 instead of trying to be 25. There's no rush. The right people will wait for you to be ready. She nodded slowly, but I could see the war happening behind her eyes, the part that wanted to believe me fighting with the part that wanted what he was offering. Is that what you did? No, I admitted. I didn't, and it cost me almost everything that mattered. But you get to learn from my mistakes instead of making your own. That's the point of sharing our stories, so the next girl doesn't have to bleed the same way. I don't know if Maria listened. I hope she did. 2 weeks later, she stopped coming to the center, and Ms. Washington said her mother had pulled her out, said we were putting ideas in her head. I wanted to believe that meant Maria had told someone, that there were adults protecting her now, but I knew it might mean the opposite, that the man had convinced her we were the problem, that we didn't understand their special connection. That's how it works. Isolation first, then exploitation. The work at the youth center became one of the most important parts of my life, more than my major in social work, more than the degree I was earning. This was where theory met practice, where my pain became purpose. I started leading workshops on recognizing manipulation, on understanding the difference between love and control, brought in speakers, a prosecutor who specialized in sex crimes, a therapist who worked with trauma survivors, a woman who'd escaped sex trafficking and now devoted her life to prevention. We didn't sugarcoat anything. These girls had already seen too much, survived too much. They deserved the truth, not sanitized fairy tales about stranger danger that ignored the reality that most predators are people you know, people you trust. I graduated with honors, not the highest in the class, but respectable, proud. Mom came to the ceremony in a new dress she'd saved for months to buy, navy blue with small white flowers, modest and lovely. She cried through the whole thing, had to borrow tissues from the stranger sitting next to her. Nora was there too, graduating from her own college the same spring. Our friendship rebuilt stronger than before because it had been tested and survived. We took photos together afterward, the three of us, me in my cap and gown, Mom beaming, Nora making faces to make us laugh. Looking at those photos now, I can see something I couldn't then, how young we all still were. Mom was only 36, had spent more than half her life raising me alone. Nora and I were 22, barely adults despite feeling ancient. How much life we had ahead of us. How the worst moments don't have to define all the moments that come after. I got a job at a nonprofit that works with at-risk youth. The pay was terrible, barely enough to cover rent and student loans, leaving nothing for savings or emergencies. I still budgeted carefully, still worried about money more than I'd like, still felt my stomach drop when unexpected expenses appeared. But I woke up every morning knowing the work I do matters, that the scared teenage girls who walk through our doors see someone who's been where they are and made it through, that maybe, just maybe, my story could be the thing that saves someone else from living it themselves. The office was in a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and industrial lighting that barely worked. My desk was a hand-me-down, my computer ancient and slow, but there were kids' drawings taped to the walls, thank you notes from girls who'd found their way out of bad situations, photos of success stories, Graduations and job offers and babies born to mothers who'd chosen a different path than the one they'd been headed down. Last month, I ran into Chloe Martinez. Pure chance. We were both in line at a coffee shop downtown, one of those artisanal places with a $15 minimum and baristas with elaborate tattoos. I was there meeting a potential donor, wearing my one good blazer and hoping I looked more professional than I felt. She looked the same, older, but not much changed. Still polished, still confident, though something in her eyes was different. Softer, maybe, or just tired. We made eye contact. I saw her debating whether to acknowledge me or pretend we were strangers, and I understood the impulse. Our shared history was ugly, full of things neither of us were proud of. "Amber," she finally said. "Hi, Chloe." We stood there awkwardly, the people behind us probably wondering why the line had stalled. The coffee machine hissed and gurgled, filling the silence. "Look," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "I've wanted to say this for years. I'm sorry. What I did, the blackmail, all of it was inexcusable. I was a terrible person. I studied her, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. Found none. Just discomfort, and what looked like genuine regret, the kind that sits heavy in your chest and doesn't let you forget." "What changed?" I asked. She laughed, bitter and self-aware. "Therapy. Lots of therapy. Turns out when you grow up with parents who value money over everything else, who measure your worth by your achievements and bank balance, you internalize some really toxic ideas about power and worth. I spent 3 years in intensive treatment learning that hurting people doesn't make you strong. It just makes you hurt." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I'm still working on it. Still unpacking all the ways I learned to see people as resources instead of humans. But I'm trying to be better, trying to make amends where I can." "That's good," I said, and meant it. "I'm sorry too, for my part in everything. You were a victim, Amber. You don't need to apologize to me. Maybe. But I'm apologizing anyway, because I think we both played roles in something ugly, even if we were playing from different positions of power. And I'm trying to learn that taking responsibility doesn't mean accepting blame for everything. It just means acknowledging my part." The barista called for the next customer. Our conversation was over, but before we parted, Chloe touched my arm lightly. "For what it's worth, I heard about your work at the youth center. What you're doing. It matters. It's more important than anything I'm doing with my finance degree and 6-figure salary." She smiled, sad and honest. "You turned your worst experience into something that helps people. You took pain and made it purposeful. That's really something. That's the kind of person I wish I'd been at 17. I watched her leave, surprised by the lack of anger I felt. Somewhere along the way, I'd let go of the need for her to suffer the way I'd suffered. Forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened or pretending it didn't hurt. It's about refusing to let the past hold you hostage, about choosing freedom over the bitter satisfaction of carrying grudges." I ordered my coffee, just a regular drip, nothing fancy, and sat down to wait for my meeting. Thought about the girl I'd been, the woman Chloe had been, how we'd both been trapped in systems that taught us wrong things about value and worth. That night, I called Mom. "Random question," I said. "Do you regret how things turned out? With my biological father, the struggles, any of it?" She was quiet for a moment, the phone line humming with distance and consideration. I could hear her TV in the background, one of those cooking shows she liked to watch while folding laundry. "I regret that it was hard," she finally answered. "I regret that you grew up with less than you deserved, that I couldn't give you the things other kids had. I regret every time you went without, every time I saw you pretending you didn't want something because you knew we couldn't afford it." Her voice caught. "But regret how it turned out? No, because it turned out with you. And you, baby, are everything good I've ever done with my life. You're proof that beauty can come from pain, that mistakes can lead to miracles if you don't give up. Now, when I tell my story to the girls at the center, I don't sugarcoat it. I don't pretend I made smart choices or that everything worked out perfectly. I tell them the truth, that I was desperate and stupid, and paid a steep price for believing easy promises, that I hurt people who loved me and made mistakes that still ache when I think about them too long, that there were nights I wanted to give up, to disappear, to stop fighting against the weight of my own shame. But I also tell them this, that mistakes aren't endings. That shame loses its power when you speak it out loud, when you refuse to let it define you. That the people who love you for real, messy, broke, imperfect you, are the ones worth keeping. That dignity and self-respect, once sold, can be bought back with time and effort and brutal honesty. And that the simple, hard-won life built on your own terms beats the gilded cage every single time. Grace, my mom, my anchor, my example of what real strength looks like, taught me that. Not through lectures or punishments, but through patience and presence and unconditional love even when I didn't deserve it. She showed me that being poor in money doesn't mean being poor in spirit. That working an honest job you can be proud of beats selling yourself in pieces for designer labels and empty promises. That the measure of a life isn't what you own, but who you are when no one's watching, when there's nothing to gain and everything to lose. I'm 25 now. I live in a small apartment that's not much nicer than the one I grew up in. Same peeling paint, same temperamental heating, same sounds of neighbors living their lives through thin walls. I still budget carefully, still shop sales, still know the anxiety of unexpected expenses, and the mental math of whether I can afford both the thing I need and the thing I want. But when I look in the mirror, I recognize the person looking back. She's not perfect. She carries scars from being 17 and stupid, and so desperately afraid of being poor forever that she made choices that nearly destroyed her. There are still nights she wakes up from dreams about Mr. Harris, still moments when she sees a black Mercedes and her heart races, still times when she questions whether she's doing enough, helping enough, being enough, but she's honest. She's kind. She does work that matters, work that saves lives in small, invisible ways that won't make headlines but change everything for the girls who walk through those doors. And she knows, bone deep and certain, that the love of one good woman who asked nothing in return was worth more than all the money and false promises in the world. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Some bridges have to burn before you realize which side of the river you actually wanted to be on. And some stories, the ones about girls who made terrible choices and somehow found their way back to themselves, those stories need to be told. Not to shame anyone or claim moral superiority, but to say, I was there. I survived. I'm still here, still fighting, still learning. And if you're there now, scared and desperate, and thinking you have to sell pieces of yourself to be worth something, please hear me. You already are worth something. Right now. Exactly as you are. The people who make you prove it with fear and compromise and silence aren't the ones who deserve you. There's a woman named Grace who taught me that. She worked double shifts and came home tired, loved me through my worst mistakes, showed me what it means to be strong not by never falling, but by always getting back up. She's getting older now. I see it in the gray threads appearing in her hair, the way she moves a little slower, the reading glasses she finally admitted she needed. And I'm terrified of the day I'll lose her, of having to exist in a world without her steady presence. But I'm also grateful. Grateful for every lesson, every sacrifice, every moment of unconditional love that taught me what real value looks like. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt desperate enough to accept promises you knew were too good to be true, share it with someone who needs to hear that there's a way back, that mistakes aren't permanent unless you let them be, that the simple, honest life, the one built on love and dignity and your own hard work, that's the one worth fighting for. Not because it's easy, but because it's real. Because you can build something lasting when the foundation is truth instead of lies, self-respect instead of shame. And if you found something valuable here, consider subscribing. Because there are more stories like this one. Stories about ordinary people surviving extraordinary mistakes. Stories about hidden kindness and second chances, and the quiet strength it takes to rebuild yourself when everything falls apart. Stories about mothers who love fiercely, and friends who forgive, and girls who learn that their worth was never up for sale in the first place. Thank you for listening. Thank you for caring enough to sit with this story even when it got uncomfortable, even when it reflected things you might recognize in yourself or someone you love. And if you're out there somewhere making the same mistakes I made, or loving someone who is, please know this. It's not too late. It's never too late to come home to yourself. The door is always open. The light is always on. And there's someone waiting who will love you, not for what you can offer, but for who you are, underneath all the fear and desperation and wrong turns. That's the lesson Grace taught me. That's the gift I try to give to every girl who walks through the center's doors. And that's the truth I wish someone had told me at 17. You are enough. You've always been enough. And anyone who makes you prove otherwise doesn't deserve the gift of knowing you.